for their testimonies. It's fascinating to hear this, and very troubling in many ways. I want to start out with Sergeant Crawford. As I mentioned in my opening statement, the Methamphetamine Remediation Research Act passed through this committee in 2007. I was a co-sponsor. I believe it was spearheaded by the then chairman of the committee, Bart Gordon, from Tennessee. In that bill, which became law, it established a research program on residue from methamphetamine production and developed voluntary guidelines for preliminary site assessment and remediation of meth labs. At that time, most meth was that was cooked in drug houses, as you spoke about, and others. The new shake and bake method of cooking, seizures aren't restricted to collecting items in drug houses. So if this committee were to revisit the law that I mentioned, we need to take this into consideration. Is there anything you could say about the new kinds of immediate or long-term risks, if any, that are faced by law enforcement officials in surrounding communities, given the prevalence of the new method?
I think the biggest issue that we're having is really in terms of the dangers associated with the one-pot labs. When we first started to see them, we didn't really understand. We understood the chemistry, but we didn't understand the long-term effects, and we didn't realize what an enormous amount of ammonia gas that the one-pot labs actually create. And so when you look at injuries, especially to law enforcement, that's our issue that we're dealing with right now, is the exposure to the ammonia gas that comes off of the one-pots, because it creates its own ammonia gas within the reaction vessel itself. So in terms of the contamination that we are dealing with these labs, whether it's a one-pot lab or other, is typically going to be your ammonia gas. But the bigger issue is in the last step of the process, when they salt out or they solidify the meth and they introduce hydrochloric acid gas to the reaction vessel, those molecules bond with one another, and because it is a gas, it escapes into the air. And that's typically the types of exposures that we're dealing with, both long-term exposures from facilities or homes or cars or whatever it is that have had cooks happen in them, especially long-term. Automobiles are a little bit less because you can roll the windows down. They're smaller. They're not going to hold in the contamination as much as others, as a house or a hotel room would.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Napier, I just wanted to ask you, you had talked about these new programs for educational programs. Is there anything more that you would like to see us doing here in Washington that would help to help the research that would feed into these programs, or in the helping to disseminate the findings of research and get this out to people?
There's always room to grow and help needed. From my perspective, in working with these outstanding educators, one of the things that we really are trying to do is determine if outcomes, are we really making a difference with our new curriculum? So we have several schools that have served as beta test sites in the Chicago metropolitan area, and we're just now getting feedback from our first year of implementing this curriculum in different schools. What we need to be able to do is to customize this curriculum to the individual community schools, and then determine if we're as effective in the different environments, because clearly the way we're going to reach children, for example, in rural areas is going to be quite different than what we're going to be needing to use in the suburban parts of Chicago. So this kind of epidemiology and this kind of validation of outcomes support takes money. We have to hire people to do this. We have to have researchers employed. And so this, again, is an area where grant support mechanisms could be very critical in driving a momentum to get this thing to the schools as quick as we can.
And is what about the funding for the research that's going on to learn more and to improve these educational programs? Is there I know there's always a need for, you could say, for more, but is there anything that's missing, anything that can be done differently?
Well, there are mechanisms for this kind of educational directives, if you will, through both the NIH and at NIDA, as well as NSF. And I think that what we need to do is to take those vehicles and optimize them. One idea that we might explore, actually, as you know, all of these programs have training grants. So we're putting young people in their PhD programs on training grants that are being supported by NIH. One of the things we might consider to do is that there would be a component required of these training grants to have these students volunteer. And this could be part and parcel to their training and part and parcel to the institutions getting the grant awarded. And I think that kind of infusion of these young, these are young men and women who are going into the neurosciences, who are right out of college, and having them work in these different high schools and junior highs would be a huge infusion of great knowledge and an understanding that would be very useful in these kinds of programs. So that's something that might not cost so much money, that might be very effectual.
Great, thank you.